This is what the pufferfish used to look like, and this is what it looks like now. Here are 68 changes in Minecraft. During Minecraft Imp Dev, axes used to look less like they were primed to chop trees and more primed to take into battle. That's because they had 2 axes on the head, making them look extremely destructive and deadly. This was changed after just a few days to look more like the wood chopping axe we're more familiar with today, as opposed to the original battle axe design. While I understand the change, I think it would have been pretty awesome to walk around wielding a battle axe. The original golden apple texture was so iconic. But of course, like many of the textures in Minecraft's texture update, the golden apple got a complete redesign. And while yes, I'm a bit nostalgic for that classic apple design, I have to admit that the new apple design is a lot cooler looking. When sponges were first added, they looked less like an actual sponge and more like a block of Swiss cheese. Later, when the block was given functionality, its texture was changed, and it looked a lot more like a sponge than it used to. Mojang could have left the block like this, but then in the texture update, where the entire look of Minecraft was given a refresh, they decided to change sponges into this. Yup, it's a cheese block again! More subtle for sure, but still, that's straight cheese, dog. So you all know about Minecraft's new wolf variations that were added in 1.20.5, but this actually wasn't the first time wolf variations were added. Back in the 1 block at a time update, you were able to name tag a wolf to Mars and get this adorable brown wolf texture. And in the vote update, you could name a wolf King B-Dogs, which is one of the developers' usernames, and give your wolf a crown. The crown might be a bit much, but I'd honestly love to be able to have this cute brown puppy in the regular game. I guess the new Woods Wolf variant will have to do. The Phantom went through several design changes where it looked more like a manta ray, more like a bug, and even one where it had a very nether-like color palette. The original concept also had this really goofy looking mouth. I think the design that they eventually ended up with was by far the coolest looking one, even if it is the worst mob in the entire game. During Minecraft Live in 2020, archaeology was announced, and you craft not 1 but 2 different brushes to dig up sniffers and pottery sherds. In the presentation, Mojang showed off an oxidized and non-oxidized version of the brush. Why? We're not really sure. And as much as I think having your oxidized brush be cleaned when you're struck by lightning is hilarious, I can't imagine this item would have served a more important purpose, and it's probably not a major loss that it was never added to the game. Pigs were one of Minecraft's first passive mobs, and their derpy, outward-facing eyes set the standard for how other mobs added to the game would eventually look. But did you know that originally these eyes were actually facing forward? That's right, this was how pigs could have looked in Minecraft. Having one of these guys staring at me while I'm trying to build would definitely make me uncomfortable. He looks like he's about to start talking to me. Believe it or not, just filling a bucket of water could easily ruin your base back in the day. You see, when you would fill your bucket from the ocean, instead of immediately filling in the hole and making the water look correct again, it would just leave this ugly flowing water animation in its place. And if you kept picking up even more water, the problem would just get worse, until you have a terrible patch of glitchy looking water completely destroying your gorgeous beachside view. This was due to the fact that flowing water wasn't actually able to spread and replenish itself unless it was on top of a solid block. So if the water was more than 1 block deep, it would never regenerate. Fortunately, this was changed in Minecraft 1.5, and all of our deep oceans, rivers, and lakes could now be reliably used as infinite water sources without causing any damage. Carrying around food already takes up 1 or 2 slots in your hotbar, but what if it took up 1 or 2 rows in your entire inventory? Well, that was a reality for many Minecraft players back in 2010, when Minecraft was still in beta. Food simply did not stack, unless you used cookies, but those would only stack up to a maximum of 8. That being said, food was much more OP back then, because instead of filling a hunger bar, food would just instantly heal back some of your hearts, so you didn't need to have nearly as much of it on you as you do nowadays. It was kind of like holding onto a bunch of instant healing potions, though some people think potions should stack too, so maybe this is still kind of an annoying difference. Do you remember when diamond blocks used to look like this? They were so ugly, and players used to build their entire houses out of them. However, in Minecraft's texture update, they finally were upgraded. Iron, redstone, and lapis don't feel majorly changed, but they just look a lot more modern now. Diamond and gold blocks both have this nice shiny texture that looks like it's glittering in the sunlight, which feels a lot fancier than the weird ambiguous textures they had before. And then the emerald block has the most extreme change, being completely redesigned into this beautifully patterned block that honestly looks incredible when used as the eyes of a statue. As compared to the original emerald block, it's no contest. Sure, the new block looks good, but you still shouldn't build your houses out of them. Old Minecraft terrain generation used to be much simpler, and as such it was far more common for structures to generate improperly. For instance, most mine shafts that generated in the world would often burst into part of a cave, and then leave the wooden supports floating exploding in the air. Nowadays, mine shafts not only look nicer, but when they generate in a cave, they're given wooden floors, either hanging from chains or supported by tall posts. It's much better than having them float, and makes them way more fun to explore as well. Just like how there used to be just a few variants of villagers, there was once a time where there was only one variant of zombie villagers. Instead of having a different texture for every single type of villager that could exist, the original zombie villager just wore the same clothes as a zombie, with a green-skinned villager-shaped head instead of the usual zombie head. Not only was it weird that the villager's clothes just suddenly instantly changed into a teal shirt and blue pants, but it was also deeply uncomfortable seeing a villager wear short sleeves. The only thing worse is learning about this secret villager texture in the game's files that depicts the villager in shorts and a tank top. Put your clothes back on, man! For the first 12 years of Minecraft's existence, it seemed like the developers wanted us to play on the lowest brightness setting, as that was the default whenever you first launched the game. Maybe they wanted the game to feel spookier and give you more of a reason to actually craft torches, but most players just wanted ahead and boosted the brightness all the way to 100 so that they could see as much as possible. So in the 1.18 Caves and Cliffs update, Mojang finally took the hint and increased the default brightness, though they only set it to 50% instead of the full 100. It's better for sure, but honestly, I think I'd still rather just use a mod that gives me permanent night vision. Setting your spawn point at your bed is a fundamental Minecraft mechanic, and while it's as easy as just right-clicking it nowadays, it didn't used to be so simple, because when beds were originally added, the only way to actually set your spawn was to fully sleep through the night. So if there were any monsters nearby preventing you from going to bed, you'd have to actually fight them in order to guarantee you could set your spawn. And you couldn't just wait for the day either, because when the sun comes out and the monsters go away, you can't sleep anymore. So setting your spawn is once again impossible. This really made it hard to justify building your base too far from spawn, so I'm personally very thankful that setting your spawn point isn't as much of a pain as it used to be. Everyone knows now that a boat can be used to negate all fall damage. It's a useful life hack, but just be sure not to do this in versions before Minecraft 1.7.2, because back then, falling from a boat was just like falling on your feet, which is to say very, very painful. Of course, it doesn't really make much sense that the boat would save you from taking full damage. It's just a plank of wood after all. The end poem is iconic, but honestly, just way too long to read. I don't think I've ever even read the entire thing through once. It just scrolls way too slow. It literally takes over 7.5 minutes to just sit and watch the poem gradually scroll its way across your screen, which is just too much of a commitment. But if you hold space, there's actually now a way to speed up how fast it scrolls, and potentially read the whole thing in a more reasonable amount of time. But personally, I'm probably just gonna continue skipping straight past it to respawn. In the past, it was impossible to damage multiple mobs at once using a sword, since this was before the sword's sweeping edge existed. So instead of instantly killing a bunch of pre-damaged mobs with one sword swing to collect all of the XP, you had to individually kill all of the mobs from your skeleton farm one at a time. Say what you want about the 1.9 combat update, it definitely made using these farms much more manageable. While most of Minecraft's texture update was a resounding success, there are a few new textures that are just plainly worse than the originals. For example, take a look at the potato. The original potato had a wonderful shape, excellent shading, and some really iconic shapes on them. Looks like a face if you ask me. See that? There's two little eyes and a mouth. Anyone else see that? Looks like a fat baby. Just me? Okay then. Anyway. Now the new potato is just an incredibly generic shape and pretty much lacks any identifiable features at all. I mean, it's just a potato, it doesn't have to be that exciting, but it still feels like this was an overall downgrade. There aren't many items in Minecraft that are immune to being destroyed. The nether star is immune to explosion damage, netherite items are immune to fire damage, and that's it. Since there aren't many examples, it probably shouldn't come as a surprise that there was a way to actually destroy any of these damage-immune items via a bug. You see, no matter how many items you put inside of a shulker box in the past, the whole thing would get destroyed the moment it touched fire, a cactus, or an explosion. All your netherite gear burned up in an instant. So to make this make a little more sense, Mojang changed the behavior of shulker boxes in 1.17, causing them to spill out their items when destroyed instead of just disappearing immediately. This means that your fireproof items won't just immediately burn, and even some of your other valuable items might have a better chance of jumping out of harm's way. When the bamboo block was added to Minecraft, Minecraft, its texture was yellow, which was accurate to how bamboo looked in the real world. A green outer layer and a yellow interior. However, since they were also adding the stripped bamboo block, which was entirely yellow, players were a little disappointed that the top of the regular bamboo block wasn't green. So despite it not necessarily being the most accurate, Mojang decided to give in and make the block entirely green, giving us one more texture to build with. When the armadillo was first added in snapshot 23W51A, it looked like this! Look at those eyes! Yeah, for some reason the texture artists at Mojang thought that placing the armadillo's eyes on the front of its tiny head was better than placing them on the sides. People pretty quickly started making fun of this design, so just a few weeks later, the texture was changed, and we all quickly forgot about Derp Face Armadillo. You know, they say if its eyes are on the front of its face, it's a predator. You may not have noticed, but throughout Minecraft's history, this little texture has been on a wild ride. It was first added in the 1.8 update, when the enchanting table was changed to consume lapis lazuli. Then in the snapshots for the 1.18 update, it was changed to this, losing some of its detail. Doesn't seem that crazy, right? Well, then in the official 1.18 release, they changed the texture to this, which is just a completely desaturated version of the lapis lazuli texture. You'd think it would end there and that Mojang was finally happy with how this one tiny texture looks. Well, guess again. In update 1.20.2, Mojang decided to revert it back to how it looked during the 1.18 snapshots, ending up with the version of the texture that had the least detail. We'll have to see if they're actually happy with this or if they're going to change it several more times in the next few years. Glowstone used to be one of Minecraft's most hated blocks, since it was one of the only light sources back in the day, but its texture was so bizarre and hard to use in building. It wasn't just a yellow block, it also had this gross green tint to it that made it look like it was moldy or something. I mean, the nether was already pretty ugly, it wasn't making that place look any worse, but it was really annoying that one of our only options for persistent lighting in our builds had to be this of all things. We did eventually get sea lanterns too, which gave us a simpler option, but thankfully the texture for glowstone was also updated later on, making it much nicer to look at in general, and not nearly as green as it was before. Charcoal is one of those items that's pretty useful in the early game, since it allows you to easily smelt items without needing to find coal ore. But then it becomes completely useless the moment you find one cave, and you're unlikely to ever make it again. This isn't a huge deal nowadays, since coal and charcoal look very different, but when charcoal was originally added, it literally looked identical to coal. This was annoying for a lot of players who would open their inventory and go to combine their coals into a single stack, only to realize that some of their coal was actually charcoal the whole time. It wasn't a world-ending inconvenience by any means, but it definitely caused enough mild frustration that the texture change was deeply appreciated by the community. Minecraft mobs used to look all the same, but now we finally have different types of wolves, cows, pigs, and chickens that all have texture variants depending on what biome they spawned in. We still have the original mob textures for mobs that spawn in plains or forest biomes, but now we'll get mobs for hot biomes and cold biomes as well. They even went as far as to give the hot and cold chickens their own unique egg items. Is there anything special about these eggs to make them different in any way? No, it just means we can't stack them with each other, making the inventory issue just a little worse with each and every update. You might think that stonecutters were added in the village and pillage update in 2019, but you'd be mistaken. As it turns out, the block has its origins all the way back in the alpha of Minecraft Pocket Edition, where instead of being a slab with a spinning saw blade on top of it, the stonecutter was instead this furnace-like block with a few saw details on its sides. While it was used for cutting stone in the alpha stage, this feature was scrapped for the full release of Minecraft Pocket Edition, and the block lost all functionality, despite staying in the game. While you've got to respect the classics, the new stonecutter is definitely a major upgrade in terms of block design, user interface, and functionality. The only place it loses out on is its crafting recipe, since the original stonecutter literally only cost 4 cobblestone. Now we've got to shell out 3 smelted stone blocks and an iron ingot. Inflation, man. Stairs used to be one of the most annoying blocks in Minecraft. I mean, sure, they made it really convenient to travel up and down your builds without having to hold the jump button, but the fact that they disabled your ability to sprint when you ran up them made stair blocks feel really annoying to interact with. It definitely felt like something about the game was broken, so understandably, Mojang changed how sprinting works, and now your sprint is only ever cancelled if you run into a block that's too tall to step up. So you can now sprint full speed up staircases, even if that might be dangerous in the real world. Phantoms fundamentally changed how players think about sleeping in their Minecraft worlds. Previously, whether or not you slept in your Minecraft world was entirely your choice, but after the addition of Phantoms, you have to sleep in order order to make them stop spawning. You don't get the choice of just fighting your way through monsters or spending the nights in caves. Sometimes you just have to skip the night to make the phantoms go away. This was so invasive that Mojang had to add 2 gamer rules to the game for players to deal with phantoms. A player sleeping percentage game rule that allows players in multiplayer to sleep without needing every online player to be near a bed, and a do insomnia game rule, which literally just disables phantom spawning. Yeah, I'm keeping that one on. Since most of Minecraft's early textures were just made by the programmers instead of actual pixel artists, some of them looked a little rough. And no texture was a better example of this than the texture for Netherrack. This block was incredibly noisy and gross to look at, making it not only completely useless for building, but also genuinely uncomfortable to think about stepping on. Thank goodness Netherrack was later updated to look more like a redstone-like material instead of looking like something that's honestly too gory to put in a kid's game. Baby zombies are one of Minecraft's greatest threats since they're incredibly fast, have a tiny hitbox, and have the same health and damage as a regular zombie. But they used to be even worse, since unlike their grown-up counterparts, baby zombies used to be totally immune to burning in the daylight. This meant that when the sun came out and most of the monsters went away, there would still be a few of these speedy demons mulling about, ready to ruin what was supposed to be a peaceful day. I don't say this every day, but I'm glad babies can burn now. Most veteran players probably remember how Minecraft's villagers used to look. They were really basic little blocky houses that were just made of oak and cobblestone, and while they'll look okay in, say, a plains biome, they didn't necessarily look as good in something like a taiga or a savanna. Fortunately, Mojang recognized this and completely overhauled villages in the Village and Pillage update. Not only did this come with completely unique building styles for villagers in different biomes, but we even got cool new biome-specific outfits for all of the villagers. This even included unique outfits for villagers born in swamps or jungles, even though the game doesn't even have swamp villages and jungle villages. Maybe someday. Bat changes were totally unexpected. In 1.20.3, bats were given a complete redesign from the ground up. The old texture was way too HD for how small the mob is, and its face also barely resembles that of a bat. The new bat is just better in every single way. It's even got a fancy new animation that makes it flap its wings a lot more like a bat and a lot less like a hummingbird. It's crazy to think that for much of the game's early life, players had to literally memorize every crafting recipe in the game. Or if you're like me, you just Google a recipe if you needed to craft something. You see, the in-game recipe book wasn't even added to Minecraft until the 1.12 update. For the first 8 years of the game's existence, players had to strictly rely upon online sources like YouTube in order to learn how to craft anything in the game. This makes sense since for the longest time, Notch was opposed to adding any sort of tutorial to the game, as he wanted players to naturally discover most of Minecraft's features. Of course, Minecraft would eventually have so many items and mechanics that some form of in-game guides would eventually become necessary, and I think a combination of the crafting guide and the advancements menu is a pretty good compromise. Normally, the beacon is an item you can get as a reward for beating the Wither, but for a moment, Mojang made it a reward for beating the Ender Dragon as well. You see, during the snapshots for the 1.9 update, which added end cities, the end ships in the cities generated with a speed beacon on it. This would have been pretty good loot to find on the ships, if it wasn't for the fact that a week later, they were replaced with pumpkins. Then another week later, the pumpkins were replaced with a book called Work in Progress, and then 2 months after that, the book was replaced with an item frame holding a pair of elytra. So if I had to pick between a beacon or an elytra, I think I'll pick the elytra every time. Minecraft egg icons used to all look pretty much the same, and it was almost extremely difficult to tell certain eggs apart. However, in the 2025 spring drop, every single spawn egg was given its own unique texture directly inspired by the mob it's meant to spawn. Now it's much more obvious to see that this is a polar bear, and this is a panda. Iceboat highways are one of the fastest ways to travel in Minecraft. It's faster than minecart and elytra by a staggering margin. But building one of these highways in older versions of Minecraft is an incredible waste of time. Ice was added to Minecraft back in 2012, but it wasn't until 2016 that the physics of boats were overhauled, and their quirky tendency to move faster on ice was added to the game. For those 4 years, the concept of putting a boat on ice as an alternative to minecarts was ridiculous, and it certainly wasn't any better than literally just walking. Throughout its history, there have been plenty of small inconsistencies in Minecraft, and one pretty interesting example would be the block of lapis lazuli, or should I say the lapis lazuli block, as it was originally called. You see, most minerals in Minecraft are able to be converted into a compressed block form for easier storage, and almost all of them start with the words block of iron, block of gold, block of diamond, block of redstone, etc., etc. But the one oddball out was a compressed compressed version of lapis lazuli, which was instead just called the lapis lazuli block. In the 1.17 update, they fixed this inconsistency for lapis, but weirdly enough, didn't change it for the other compressible blocks, like the slime block. Not to mention how the block of quartz and the block of amethyst can't be uncompressed after they've been crafted, so should probably be called quartz block and amethyst block instead, right? This is getting confusing. Carrots and golden carrots have similar textures, but when they were first added in snapshots, they looked completely different from one another. The golden carrot was one long, skinny carrot, whereas the regular carrot was a big bundle of carrots. It was a little confusing to have two similar items be visually depicted in such different ways, especially when one just looks like a regular item and the other looks like a literal bundle of 5 items. But of course, when officially shipped in the full 1.4.2 update, carrots and golden carrots ended up having nearly identical textures, which carried over into the 1.14 texture update too. I mean, if they didn't think golden apples needed a unique shape as compared to regular apples, I'm not quite sure why they thought carrots would need one. When the endermite was first added, it was literally just a retextured silverfish. It was just given a purple recolor, and its weird little spiky hair things were removed. Is that hair? I've never really known. And to be honest, I don't want to know. Anyways, a few updates later, the endermite was given its own unique model, making it its very own brand of disgusting bug. When shields were originally added, they didn't look quite right when placed in an item frame. They were originally very off-center, making them look out of place whenever you tried to use one for decoration. It didn't necessarily make them entirely unusable, but having them now be centered is a much appreciated quality of life change. Minecraft mobs aren't that scary, but this is scary. The original drowned texture used to be a half zombie, half skeleton mix with an unsettling magenta hue. Honestly, this version of the drowned feels like it would fit in better in the nether than the ocean if you ask me. It looks more gory than zombie pigmen do. It's definitely for the best that they changed the drowned texture to be more green and blue. Not only do these colors look better in the oceans and rivers, I'm also not waking up in a cold sweat every night thinking about my recent aquatic adventures. An obscure detail in the original Minecraft trailer is this Steve. No, not that Steve! I'm talking about the version of Steve that's kitted out with both mossy cobblestone pants and a stone shirt. We never got this variant of Steve in the official release of Minecraft. There was only one default skin, the basic Steve skin. It's a shame because when it comes down to choosing between basic jeans and mossy cobblestone pants, there's a clear winner. We may not have gotten Stone Steve, but Mojang did eventually add Alex as a secondary default skin, and then a bunch of new variants in the 1.20 Trails and Tales update, adding some much needed variety. If you play alpha versions of Minecraft, you'll probably notice that the lighting looks a little rough. That's because the game didn't have any smooth lighting back then, and changes in brightness were really blocky and obvious. Back then, many players played with a mod called Better Light to improve how the game looked, and Mojang reached out to the mod's creator in order to implement a similar system into Minecraft. Getting help from modders happened many times in Minecraft's earlier development, but this was the only time a modder was given their very own custom cape as a thank you for their contribution to Minecraft. And honestly, I think it was justified, because I absolutely cannot play Minecraft without smooth lighting enabled. Ever since the elytra was added, players have always wanted the ability to disengage the elytra wings in midair, but the only way you could actually do it was by quickly opening your inventory and taking the elytra off manually. But now we actually have the ability to instantly swap our elytra with a chest plate or just right-clicking it on our hotbar. This makes doing fancy elytra maneuvers much easier, and means that you can fly up in the air with your elytra, quickly swapping to a chest plate and take out your mace to perform a smash attack, all without opening your inventory once. Or you could totally miss and just die. But it's great to have the option! Everybody knows about the Totem of Undying, the funny little villager-shaped item that effectively makes you immortal. But it didn't always look like a villager. When it was originally added, this was how the Totem of Undying looked. A funny little guy with weird little arms and 2 tiny eyes. I'm really not sure what this totem is supposed to resemble, but having such a bizarre item constantly sitting in your offhand was kind of a strain on the eyes. So it's good that it was eventually updated in Minecraft 1.14. Though every hardcore YouTuber just changes the texture to their own skin anyway, so it doesn't really matter. This was the original pufferfish texture. This goofy looking flatfish not only doesn't look all that great, but also barely looks like a pufferfish. Then when it got updated to be this bright yellow little ball, it was certainly better and more identifiable, but still felt a little off. It wasn't until it was completely changed to better resemble the actual pufferfish mob that it finally felt like this item was in its final state. It does make me a little sad though, knowing that for as cute as this guy is, he's actually dead. For whatever reason, Mojang cannot decide what to do with the cow's horns. When cows were first added to Minecraft, they were black instead of brown, and didn't have any horns at all. But when they were eventually updated to look a little nicer, the developers didn't seem to agree on where its new horns should sit. On the front of the head? The back of the head? Inside of the head? Who knows? What I do know is the fact that cows should absolutely not have this weird new snout they've gotten in more recent updates. We've officially entered the darkest timeline. The old glass texture in Minecraft was barely usable. I mean, sure, you can see what they were going for. The white lines are supposed to make the glass appear shiny. But honestly, it just looks like your cat scratched the window one too many times, and now your view of the outside world is covered in white pixels. When you compare the new and old glass textures, there's a clear winner here. Get it? Clear? The new glass texture is mostly just a frame, and you can actually see through it. Feels like it'd be obvious, but hey, it only took them 10 years to eventually figure it out. Most players know that the Prismarine block is animated now. It slowly turns from blue to green over time. It's a bit subtle now, but it was far more noticeable back when it was originally added in Minecraft 1.8. It was darker and noisier, kind of resembling a blue version of Netherrack, and the color shift was much more obvious. This made Prismarine a much harder block to build with, since its appearance wasn't very consistent, so it does make some sense that the color shift was later changed to be subtler. But I also think it's too subtle. Most people probably don't realize it has an animated texture. One odd thing about the original cactus block was the fact that it had black spines. I mean, if you look at almost any cactus in the world, you'll probably notice that it has white spines, so these black spines didn't feel super true to life. So the block was changed to have white spines to be more realistic, and later on, it was also updated to grow flowers on top of itself, making the desert significantly nicer to look at with the cactus flowers and dry grass combined. Though apparently farming these cactus flowers is kind of a pain, so good luck getting enough of them to use in a custom build. Minecraft is constantly getting new colors of wood nowadays, with the community excitedly speculating what the next new color will be. I'm personally hoping for green. But there was once a time where differently colored wooden planks weren't even a thing in the game. Before update 1.2.4, every type of log would just be crafted down into this tan-colored wooden planks block. Building already feels hard enough nowadays, but you're telling me that the only color option players used to have was just oak? Well, at least it wasn't birch. Most people know that the anvil has a 50-character limit, so you can't have a name longer than that. However, previously the limit was actually smaller, at only 35 characters. That feels like it would be more than enough room for renaming your items, but the reason it got increased is because there was almost an item added to the game that would exceed that 35-character limit. You see, when copper blocks were first added, the first oxidation stage that is now called exposed used to be called lightly weathered, meaning it was possible to craft yourself some waxed lightly weather-cut copper stairs, totaling a whopping 41 characters. This forced Mojang to increase the anvil renaming limit. But ironically, they ended up just renaming the item later on, so extending the character limit wasn't even really necessary. But hey, I'm so glad I now get to name my items things like this. Most people know that Minecraft 1.14 overhauled every texture in the game, giving the game its unique and iconic look we know today. But fewer people know that this update overhauled the names of some items too. For example, these three items used to be called Rose Red, Dandelion Yellow, and Cactus Green. This was a much needed change, since it was possible to get both red and yellow dye from sources other than dandelions or rose bushes. I mean, imagine crafting your lapis lazuli into dye and getting an item called Cornflower Blue. Yeah, that'd be weird. Though technically there unfortunately still isn't a way to get green dye from anything other than a cactus, so I guess that one would have been fine. Some Minecraft items are so useless that even Mojang forgets they exist. During Minecraft's texture update, which supposedly updated every texture in the game, a few things were intentionally skipped. Some of these were just because Mojang thought the texture didn't need to be changed at all, like the creepers texture. But some of these seem to just be because they forgot, such as the clock. The texture update happened in Minecraft 1.14, but it wasn't until Minecraft 1.17, over 2 years later, that the clock was finally given a new appearance. I guess I can understand that it's a more complicated item to retexture, since it effectively has 64 frames of animation, but it does feel a lot like the clock was just overlooked as something worth retexturing for a while. I mean, it's hardly even worth crafting, so I really don't blame them. Striders are creatures meant to live in the lava, and whenever they're not in the lava, they get cold, so they turn purple and start shaking. That is, unless they've had their brains removed. You see, it's possible to summon any mob without any AI. When you used to summon a strider with no AI, it would still turn purple and shake when out of the lava. But now when you summon a strider with no AI, it will always be red, no matter what. You can dunk him in an ice bath, and he won't Don't even be bothered. This guy is literally unshakable. Do you remember the original design of horses? They were incredibly high detail, with moving jaws, bendable legs, and 3D saddles. A lot of people felt like horses looked too modded, which makes sense, since they were directly inspired by the horses from the Mo Creatures mob, and the mod creator, Dr. Zark, even helped to officially add them to the game. They stayed this way for 5 years, until Mojang looked at the horse one day and suddenly realized it looks nothing like any of the other mobs in the game, and gave it a complete redesign to be much simpler. This new design definitely fits into the rest of the game much better, but I have to admit, I'm still a little bit nostalgic for that original design. Look, they kicked their tiny feet! Beacons can be used in the Nether, and that's thanks to a handy little feature where beacon beams are able to go through bedrock. But this wasn't always the case. In older versions of the game, you had to find some way to destroy the bedrock ceiling if you wanted your beacon beam to shine through to the Nether sky. This original behavior did seem a lot more logical, but Mojang probably didn't want players using bugs and glitches to break what's supposed to be an unbreakable block just to set up a beacon. So they needed to come up with some sort of compromise, even if it does seem a little odd. When the Vex was first added to Minecraft, it was illegal! It was such a small mob, but its model had the same pixel density as a full-size player. It looked very out of place with its HD textures, and almost like something you'd find in a mod. So the model change in 1.19.3 to make the Vex more closely resemble the Alley not only improved how this mob looked, but also kind of added some lore implications to the game as well. Are the Vexes just corrupted versions of the Alley, turned evil by evokers? You've probably seen a lot of people build their portal in this 4x5 shape, which is the smallest possible portal you can build in Minecraft. But this isn't just for conserving resources, it's also because, in the past, it was impossible to build a portal that was any bigger than this. Where nowadays we can build portals up to a whopping 23 by 23 blocks, the portal structure used to only ever work in this one shape. So if you built a portal room that was an odd number of blocks wide, you'd either have to rebuild the room to be an even instead, or just put 2 portals in the room to compensate. The lower half of the end portal frames texture is the same as end stone, but for the longest time, this texture didn't actually seamlessly connect with the actual end stone block. It was modified in the 1.19 update to be a bit of a smoother transition, but if you think about it, this was kind of an unnecessary change. I mean, the only place end portal frames can actually spawn is in the portal room. In the overworld! Flowing water is able to push entities around, but weirdly enough, flowing lava wasn't previously able to do this. For the longest time, if a player with fire resistance stood inside flowing lava, they would just stand perfectly still. This was probably an oversight by the developers, who thought there was no point in making lava push mobs since they're likely going to die so quickly. But when it came time to do the big Nether update in 1.16, they realized that the sheer number of fire-resistant mobs probably justified giving lava this feature, and now making mob farms in the Nether is significantly easier than it used to be. For the longest time, the fortune enchantment didn't work on gold or iron, since mining these blocks would only ever drop the block itself. But this all changed in the Caves and Cliffs update, where iron ore would instead drop the new raw iron item when mined, allowing the fortune enchantment to finally actually work. But if you look closely at the raw iron texture, you might notice that it looks less like a hunk of raw metal and more like a hunk of raw meat. Seriously, the item looks more like it belongs with raw chicken and raw rabbit than it does with raw gold and raw copper. As for the raw iron block, that is literally a pile of potatoes. Desert temples have experienced a lot of changes ever since their debut back in Minecraft 1.3.1. Desert temples used to generate with colored wall detailing instead of colored terracotta, which made the orange shapes on the outside of the temple too bright and saturated. It also meant that what was supposed to be a sturdy, ancient sandstone structure could now easily catch fire, leaving these ugly holes on the outside. Thankfully, this was changed in Minecraft 1.8, and now the temples spawn with the much less flammable terracotta blocks, which are a little more desaturated too. I personally liked crafting a bed from desert temple wool, but for some reason the monsters inside the temple didn't want me sleeping over. Using a shovel on the ground to create path blocks is one of the easiest ways to give your Minecraft build some nice looking roads, but it used to be much more annoying to actually create them, since originally path blocks would only ever be created if you specifically used a shovel on a grass block. This meant that if you had one block of dirt in the middle of your path, you'd have to somehow get grass to spread onto it if you wanted to flatten it down with the rest of its surrounding blocks. This was obviously way too annoying, annoying, so Mojang eventually allowed us to just create path blocks using any dirt-like block, including coarse dirt, podzol, and mycelium. Just don't ask where the yellow grass comes from when doing it on a dirt block. Your guess is as good as mine. Did you know that Minecraft has a dark mode? Well, sort of. There are several settings in the accessibility settings menu that you can enable to have a dark mode menu. Simply enable the monochrome logo and then turn on high contrast mode. Immediately, you'll then be greeted with this new black Mojang loading screen, and then you'll see that all of your menu buttons have this black, cyan, and magenta color scheme. The only thing this is missing now is a matching color scheme for all of the inventory screens and workbenches. If you remember Minecraft's old mob AI, you probably know just how terrible it was. Mobs would often just walk in a straight line towards you and wouldn't even try to walk around walls. This made it pretty easy to outmaneuver most mobs by just walking around a building, causing them to get stuck and leave you alone. Although many of Minecraft's features have their roots in realism, when some of these features were first added, they weren't actually accurate to the real world at all. For example, Minecraft's sun used to rise in the north and set in the south, whereas the sun in the real world rises in the east and sets in the west. I guess when Notch was adding the day-night cycle, he really didn't think much about which direction it was going in, and it was only fixed later on when the community pointed out that the sun's rising direction wasn't very realistic. Sometimes a community caring about realism is a pretty good thing, like when Mojang changed the item used to tame parrots from cookies to seeds. But in other cases, features like the fireflies have gotten completely removed. So maybe we should be careful about making Minecraft realistic in the future. When slabs were first added to Minecraft, there was only one type of slab, the smooth stone slab, and the way you crafted it felt really bizarre. No, it didn't take 3 stone blocks, it took 3 cobblestone blocks. Looking at this recipe nowadays feels really cursed, but if you think about how few items existed in Minecraft to create crafting recipes with, it kind of makes sense. Then of course a recipe was changed to use a regular stone block in the 1.3 update, and then it was changed for the final time in 1.14, now being crafted with an actual smooth stone block. I guess in early Minecraft, Mojang wanted to make sure you didn't lose certain items when you dropped them on the ground. Certain item forms of blocks would always render way too large when dropped as an item entity, which obviously made them easier to spot. But yeah, this was definitely a bug, so it got patched out pretty quickly. Everyone knows about Minecraft's iconic pink sheep, which has an incredibly low chance of naturally spawning. But did you know that when sheep were first added, some of their colors were a bit off? The original pink sheep had this super light and desaturated color, making it look like cotton candy. It is pretty cute, but bizarrely, its color didn't really match the pink wool block at all. The same was also true for the light blue sheep. But what was even worse was the orange sheep. Yeah, it's literally yellow! Man, Notch really needs to get his eyes fixed. You might think you could just use fence gates to go in and out of your farm, but back in this version of Minecraft, fence gates didn't exist. So instead, players had to either break and place back their fences, place blocks near the fence to parkour in and out, or the ugliest option, use a regular door as the entrance to your farm. None of these options were very good, but most people would end up choosing the door option, because while it looks absolutely terrible, it did happen to be the most convenient. But today, I think I'd rather stick with fence gates now that we have them. Getting your crops trampled is one of the most annoying things that can happen in Minecraft, but it used to be so much worse. Currently, a crop will be trampled if a mob falls or jumps on the block, but originally you could trample crops by just walking on them. This meant that you literally couldn't collect the items from your farm without having to retill the land. Additionally, this also meant that any farms you made that didn't have fences around them were pretty much guaranteed to be ruined by mobs walking by at some point, making it extra important to fence in your crops. Did you know there used to be a button for adding mods built into Minecraft's menu? Seriously, this button that says mods and texture packs was on the title screen for a while, making it seem like they were planning to expand the game's support for mods. Instead, they eventually just removed the mods part of the button, tucked it away in the options menu, and renamed texture packs to resource packs. And we can still only really use mods if we're using a mod loader like Fabric or Forge. Although if you consider data packs to be mods, then I guess they did eventually make this idea into reality, just not in the way anyone expected. Bone meal is one of the most powerful items in Minecraft, allowing you to speed up the growth of any crop. But originally, it was even better than it is now. Instead of having a random chance to make a crop grow by 1 level, bone meal was able to instantly grow any crop with just 1 item. This gave players a very good reason to hunt skeletons, since with just a few bones, you could quickly and easily get a ton of wood or food instead of having to wait for such a long time. Trust me, you haven't felt real power until you've tried using bone meal before the 1.5 update. Bows in Minecraft are pretty good, but they're nothing like they were in Minecraft in-dev. Back then, not only did they have infinite durability, but they also had no charge time, allowing you to spam arrows arrows as fast as you like. These arrows traveled at their maximum speed, so they were really overpowered. So it makes sense that Notch decided to make the bow require a bit of a charge time. Still, it might be nice to get functionality like this back into the current game in some balanced way, like a quick fire enchantment. Originally, there was no way to skip the night in Minecraft. Before the addition of beds in Beta 1.3, you just had to survive the night, fighting off mobs and lighting up the darkness. It was pretty brutal, and it really makes me realize just how easy the game is when you can always sleep through the night. I mean, maybe if they remove phantoms, I might actually want to play at night more. Who knows? The Caves and Cliffs update made Minecraft's cave systems much more diverse and beautiful. But once upon a time, there were no cave biomes, and there were no variations of stone. All you had were these long, noodly caves, and the same stone texture continuing on and on forever. It may seem a little boring looking back, but these old caves were just so immersive and scary to me. Maybe that's just nostalgia speaking, but you know what? I don't care! Which came first, the village or the villagers? No, this isn't some lame riddle. There's actually an answer to this one. It's villages! That's right, before Mojang even added villagers to the game, they added these creepy, empty villages, which made the world feel so dead and eerie when they were first added. Then of course, villagers were later added to the game, and we all realized there wasn't anything to be afraid of in these villages at all, except how villagers look, I guess. Mossy cobblestone is pretty easy to get a hold of nowadays, but there was a time where it wasn't actually craftable, and the only structure it ever spawned in was a monster dungeon. This made the block incredibly rare, so building your house out of mossy cobble was kind of a flex, but now you can farm it so easily it's practically worth nothing. I guess that's inflation for you. Nowadays, Minecraft's menu screen has this slick, high-quality logo and a panoramic background that changes with every update. But you might remember that the original menu screen looks like this, just dark dirt blocks in the background, and a Minecraft logo that's just made out of stone blocks. The letters in the word Minecraft would animate in every time you came back to the main menu, which was super satisfying to watch, and I honestly wish the current menu did something like this. All it does is just sit there. Do something, boring letters! Did you know that you need to be able to change your render distance by just hitting F on your keyboard? Seriously, instead of modifying your render distance in the video settings menu, you used to just tap a key on your keyboard to cycle through a few different preset render distances, allowing you to quickly swap between low render distances for performance and high render distances for screenshots. Eventually, this key was removed, and probably for good reason, since I imagine hitting the F key is pretty easy to do by accident. Now F is bound to item swapping, which is why I always accidentally end up with a pickaxe in the wrong hand. Although wood planks feel like a default material in Minecraft, for a long time, most types of wood planks didn't even exist. Originally, every type of tree in Minecraft would just craft down into a block that just looked like oak planks. Whether it was a spruce log, a birch log, or a jungle log, they all turned into this generic planks block, and it wasn't until the 1.2.4 update that they each got their own unique texture. From here, the potential of Minecraft building began to really unfold, as we got things like slabs, fences, and stairs in all sorts of new colors. Could you imagine how Minecraft buildings would look today if Mojang decided to stick with just one plank type for all logs? It'd be a beige nightmare. Creative mode feels like one of Minecraft's main game modes, but back in Minecraft Beta, it didn't even officially exist. The only way to play something like creative mode was to use mods that gave you infinite items. But I never did that. I always got my items legit. Do you remember the crazy bug that made it possible to have an unbreakable diamond pickaxe? All you had to do was start breaking a block and then immediately swap to a different tool the moment the block broke. This means that if you can pull off the timing consistently enough, you're able to mine as much as you want with a diamond pickaxe by just putting all of the tool damage onto wooden pickaxes. Though to be honest, actually trying to do this in a survival world is probably just too annoying to make it worth it. For most players, the item that creepers drop on death is called gunpowder, but to some Minecraft veterans, this item is still called sulfur. You see, when it was first added to the game, that's what the item was called, and it could be dropped by any mob. It took over a year of sulfur being in the game for it to eventually be renamed to gunpowder, which definitely helps players understand what it's for if they don't know what sulfur actually is. Finding monster spawners to create mob farms used to actually be surprisingly easy. This is because they spawn so close to the surface, so you can probably hear the mobs inside and easily locate one by ear. But even easier than that, if you just head on over to a desert, chances are pretty good that you'll find a monster spawner that has caved in, since sand is a falling block. I really miss discovering these in my world. It always felt so cool finding one of these in the old game. Cookies are kind of a niche food nowadays, but they were considered a rare item when they were originally added, since cookies are crafted with cocoa beans, and cocoa beans used to be rare loot only found in dungeon chests. They were pretty hard to get a hold of. Then once you did actually find them, there wasn't a way to farm them yet. So if you wanted even more cookies, you'd have to go out and find another dungeon. That's a lot of work for a food source that honestly isn't even that good. But hey, I guess it's a flex. When fences were first added to Minecraft, they were actually full blocks. Well, obviously they don't look like it, but if you hover your cursor over a fence block, you'll see that its hitbox is actually much larger than the fence itself. This meant it was very easy to accidentally bump into the invisible edges of the fence block when trying to walk near them, which was super annoying. To make matters even worse, these old fences didn't even connect to solid blocks. They could only connect to each other. So if you wanted to have a fence connected to a building, well, enjoy the ugly gap. Zombie pigmen used to drop cooked pork chop when they were first added to Minecraft. This kind of made sense since they were pigs that lived in the lava-filled nether, so I guess they're already walking around pre-cooked? That's kind of gross to think about. Ew. Anyways, for the official release of the game, these mobs had their drops very appropriately changed to be gold nuggets and rotten flesh instead. I refuse to believe a creature that looks like that is dropping anything that's freshly cooked. Oh my gosh, remember when you couldn't use a tool to speed up breaking a crafting table or furnace? It was so painful! Even with a nice diamond axe, breaking down your crafting table feels like it takes ages, and the furnace was even worse. If they never made these blocks faster to break, I probably would have stopped playing ages ago. Or I would have just wasted all my wood constantly crafting new crafting tables. Hey, I guess I already do that. Doesn't it feel like there are barely any passive mobs that spawn in Minecraft nowadays? That's probably because nowadays, Minecraft has a passive mob cap, which limits the number of passive mobs that can spawn in every chunk. This wasn't the case in older versions of the game, and passive mobs would continue spawning anywhere in the world, so players would always be able to find food and wool without having to walk for very long. So I didn't have to feel bad for murdering every animal I saw on sight. They were better times. Do you remember when Minecraft was simple, that the ultimate end goal was really just finding diamonds and making some diamond tools? Seriously, before the Ender Dragon or villagers or enchanting, all we could really do is slowly get better tools, dive deeper into the caves, and try to build cool houses. It was definitely a much simpler time, but that's what was so great about it. You could really just do whatever you like, such as continue mining a ridiculous number of diamonds. One of Minecraft Alpha's most annoying features was the fact that leaves were permanent. This meant that when you chopped down a tree, all of the leaves stayed floating in the air. So, if you wanted to clear out part of a forest to build your house, you have to manually punch every leaf one by one until they were all gone. This was so boring and not fun at all, so the leaf decay mechanic was pretty essential to prevent Minecraft from becoming a leaf punching simulator. Although it wasn't even in the game for a very long time, the old Minecraft hurt sound is iconic. There's something so satisfying about hearing this sound whenever you take damage, and even though it might not be a perfect fit for the modern game, I wish they consider at least adding it back to the game via the Programmer Art resource pack, which contains all of the old Minecraft textures. Add it or I'm boycotting Minecraft! Only some players remember that the villager's original name was the Testificate. It was a name used in a few beta versions that didn't seem to mean anything, but the term stuck around in the Minecraft community for a long time, often being used to refer to villagers a long time ago. Now it's just a relic of the past that few modern players probably even remember. Nowadays, water is famous for being able to stop the player from taking all fall damage, no matter how high up they've fallen from. Now, water has always stopped fall damage if it was deep enough, but there was a time when water that was only 1 block deep didn't actually provide any fall damage prevention at all. So if you're a modern Minecrafter who wants to try playing a bit of beta, maybe don't try doing any bucket clutches, because it probably won't work out how you expect. Flint and steel and TNT were added around the same time, but believe it or not, TNT wasn't actually ignited using flint and steel at all. Instead, you just punched TNT to ignite it, and flint and steel was explicitly used for creating fires. It was kind of weird how obvious it was that these two items should probably be related to each other, but Notch eventually figured it out and made TNT behave how it does now. If you're wondering how you were supposed to pick up this old version of TNT since trying to mine it just ignites it, well, apparently you're just supposed to punch it again. Not sure that's great advice for actual bomb defusing, but hey, what do I know? There are over 1,000 items in Minecraft, and that number just keeps going up with every update. So the fact that the creative inventory has tabs and a search bar makes it much easier to find the blocks and items you're looking for. But originally, the creative menu was much simpler. Instead of being organized, every item in the game was just an in a single massive page, and you just had to memorize where every item was in the list. To be fair, these items were kind of sorted, but it was still a huge pain to navigate. I don't know how anyone built anything back then without going absolutely insane. If you've been playing Minecraft long enough, you probably remember when zombie villagers looked like this. Instead of directly resembling their villager counterparts, zombie villagers used to just wear the same clothes as regular zombies, with the main difference being their head shape. It really made the mob feel like a pretty lazy tweak of the regular zombie, and it stayed this way for nearly 3 years. When they finally changed zombie villagers to actually keep their villager clothes when they were infected, it felt like a huge upgrade to the mob, giving them their own identity. Thank goodness we no longer have to bear witness to the unholy sight of a villager wearing short sleeves and jeans. When creative mode was first added to Minecraft, the developers decided to help get you started in every new creative world you create by putting a bunch of random blocks in your inventory. Maybe some people found this useful to quickly get to building something cool, but I think in general, most people probably preferred to chuck everything out and start with an empty hotbar, which they could fill with whatever blocks they wanted to build with themselves. I don't know, I never really understood the point of this feature, and I was glad to see it get removed. Let me know if you ever actually just use these default blocks to build with. I bet you'll say no. Minecraft still has cave sounds, but you don't seem to hear them as much as you used to back in the day. Back in the day, it feels like you couldn't go mining without hearing at least one of these terrifying noises. And if you've ever played the game before 2020, you've probably heard one of the rare low-pitch versions of cave sounds that got removed in the 1.16 update. As much as I miss these old sounds, I'm glad I can go in caves nowadays without having to change my trousers every 30 minutes. When creative mode was first added, it wasn't perfect, and one of the key missing features was having mobs be neutral towards you. Sure, you were invincible and couldn't take any damage, but as far as the mobs were concerned, you were still something they could attack, so they would just hopelessly chase you like needy fans. This isn't a huge deal for mobs like skeletons, zombies, and spiders, but obviously for creepers, this was an absolute nightmare, since you'd just be minding your own business, building a house in creative mode, and then a creeper would pop by to ruin everything. Nowadays, Mojang tries to make Minecraft a very ethical game, and discourages players from harming innocent animals, but originally the only way you could get wool off of a sheep was by punching it. This was a bit different from other mobs, where you got loot from them by actually killing them and putting them out of their misery. The best way to farm wool was to just punch a sheep, wait for it to grow the wool back, and punch it again, continuing the cycle until you slowly beat it to death. Obviously, that was way too cruel to keep in the game, so thank goodness the developers gave us shears. Sorry, sheepy, my bad. Since food in Minecraft used to just be used to instantly heal back a few hearts, it actually lacked any sort of proper eating animation. So instead of gradually taking bites out of a cooked pork chop, you just instantly swallow the entire thing whole. Sure, it might be a more efficient way to finish your food, but you might end up with a stomachache later from not chewing. Do you remember when cobblestone used to look like this? It was one of the first blocks added to the game, so it had a pretty basic texture, and honestly, a lot of people considered it to be pretty ugly. Over the years, its texture was tweaked to have a lot less contrast, and although it's probably better for building now, I still kinda miss the old cobblestone block. You might think that minecarts were the fastest form of transportation in early Minecraft, before we had horses or elytra, but there was actually a faster way: boats. No, I'm not talking about sailing in the ocean. I'm talking about building boat bridges. By placing a series of boats all in a line, you can spam right-click to instantly travel from one boat to the next, allowing you to transport yourself across pretty long distances in a matter of seconds. As an added bonus, building a couple of boats is much cheaper than crafting minecarts and rails. Ironically, boats are still better than minecarts today, since they move so fast on top of ice. Seriously, why do we even have minecarts at this point? Nowadays, most mobs have attack animations, like zombies swinging their arms up when they hit you, and skeletons pulling back the strings of their bows. But back in the day, mobs didn't have any animations at all. They just walked up to you and dealt damage when they touched you. Worst of all, the skeleton didn't even hold its bow like an actual bow. Instead, it just showed up in its hand like a regular item, and an arrow would just spawn in front of it when it went to shoot at the player. It's pretty fun to watch, but made the mob feel pretty incomplete, so I'm glad they eventually had the sense to change the skeleton's animations. If you were picking the default keybinds for Minecraft, what key would you pick for opening your inventory? Well, the letter I might be an obvious pick, but if you think about where it is on the keyboard, it's a little too far away from any of the other keys the player uses regularly. Regardless, this was actually the original inventory keybind, and apparently some people still rebind the inventory key to I to this day, since they're so used to it. Personally, I think that's absolutely foul. I keep inventory bound to caps lock. Creepers actually used to be a lot scarier when they were first added. Nowadays, a creeper gives you a lot of heads up to let you know he's about to blow you up. It makes a little sound, stands perfectly still, and starts flashing white. But originally, creepers would just run up to you, start walking to the side of it, and then blow up super quickly. This almost never felt fair, and it made fighting a creeper a much more terrifying experience, almost guaranteed to result in your builds being destroyed. I'm glad we don't have these creepers in the game anymore. I always have a hard time enough with the new ones. Currently, the sound creepers and TNT make when exploding sounds like this. But originally, this sound was very different. Take a listen. It used to sound a lot more bassy and compressed, like it was from a 90s game or something. Maybe this fits in with Minecraft's old retro aesthetic, but the art style has come a long way, so it's probably good they've tweaked the sound. Can you believe we only used to be able to create 5 Minecraft worlds in total? For a game where you can build anything, the idea of limiting how much a player can build is pretty odd. I mean, if you think about it, every world is technically infinite, so you could just keep walking until you find new chunks. But I think if this limitation existed today, we'd all still be pretty irritated. Minecraft has dozens and dozens of diverse biomes nowadays. It's easy to forget that it all started with this simple forest biome. Bright green grass, bright green trees, and some small hills. Nothing crazy, but it still felt like home. Most YouTubers play Minecraft on its brightest setting to make the game easier to watch. But originally, Minecraft was so unbelievably dark and had no way to adjust its brightness. This made exploring any cave feel like walking around in a pitch-black room where your torches only let you see a few steps ahead. Honestly, it was a completely different experience, one that was much scarier and more immersive, and it makes me wish Mojang found some sort of way to bring that feeling back to the game. And no, the deep dark doesn't count, it's just too boring! Fences in Minecraft are 50% more expensive than they used to be. Originally, in order to get a wooden fence, all you need to do is put 6 sticks into the crafting table. Now we have to also add 4 wooden planks to specify what color fence we want. It makes sense that they had to change the recipe to account for having fences in any color, but come on man, this was such a deal! When you go to fight a boss in Minecraft like the Ender Dragon, the name of the mob shows up above its health bar. But this wasn't always the case. Back when the Ender Dragon was the only boss in the game, it originally just had the text Boss Health at the top of the screen. It was only after the wither was added in the pretty scary update that the developers realized it might be good to make the health bar's title a little more specific and change the Ender Dragon to say Ender Dragon and the wither to say Wither. As an added bonus, if you can actually manage to get a name tag onto a wither, you can make the boss bar at the top of the screen say whatever you like. So maybe if you rename it Boss Health, you can feel like you're still playing Minecraft in the olden days. Every Minecraft YouTuber you've ever watched has probably talked to you by using F5 mode and looking directly into the camera. Well, everyone except the people playing beta Minecraft. Back then, hitting F5 would only show you your backside, and it wasn't originally possible to view the player's face in the third-person view. Just think, if they kept F5 mode like this, then we never would have had Camman 18. What a tragedy. Minecraft's tutorial is pretty lacking, but apparently that's mostly by design. Direct guidance on how exactly to play Minecraft was intentionally left out of the game early on, to allow players to explore the games themselves and decide what it is they wanted to do. This was fine for the most part, but the one thing that really felt ridiculously unfair was the fact that there were so many crafting recipes in the game, and there was no official place to see them all. Sure, you had the community wiki, the Minecraft forums, and countless YouTube videos talking about recipes for new items, but the fact that the recipe book wasn't added until 1.12 really makes me wonder how on earth most players even survived in the past. Like, don't ask me how to craft a daylight detector. Nobody knows that off the top of their head! Do you remember how annoying it used to be to break wooden doors? It used to be possible to open wooden doors by either right-clicking them or left-clicking them, meaning that if you tried punching a door to break it, it would open up, stopping you from destroying it unless you're specifically aiming at the door's hinge. This wasn't the biggest deal, but it did give a lot of older players a muscle memory to always break doors at their hinge, which I'm sure some people still instinctively do to this day, myself included. There used to be a way to see through walls and find caves, and it wasn't a bug. Originally, when hitting the F3 key on your keyboard, every mob would show its mob ID above its head as a name tag, and just like player name tags, these could be seen through walls. This meant that by just hitting F3, you could look for name tags beneath your feet to find mob spawning underground in caves. And if you saw a large clump of name tags, then congratulations, because you probably found a mob spawner. This has got to be one one of the most overpowered features that Mojang has ever intentionally put in the game. Enchanting already feels like it takes a lot of luck, but when enchanting tables were first added, it was literal gambling. The current enchanting tables allows you to preview one of the enchantments you could get on your item, but this didn't always exist. You just had to cross your fingers and hope that whatever you're about to spend all of your levels on is going to be worth it. And it's Aqua Affinity. Great, thanks. Minecraft's fire is very forgiving, but it used to be just as rampant and dangerous as real fires are. If you were lucky enough to generate a lava pool in a forest, well, the forest fire would spread so quickly that you had no shot of putting them out. Best thing you can do is just start gathering materials to build a house in some recently flattened land. If you played Minecraft in beta, then you probably know that many of Minecraft's main survival mechanics weren't actually added until the game's full release, including the hunger system. In the past, the player didn't have a hunger bar at all, and eating food would just directly heal back some of your hearts. You may think that this made food much more powerful in the past, but there's one missing feature that honestly makes food way better in the modern game, and that's sprinting. Since having a full hunger bar lets you sprint, it's much easier to evade and escape from attacking mobs. Back in the day, players walked incredibly slowly, so if you were facing off against something like a skeleton, your only options were to win the fight or die. And since food didn't stack, you effectively had to fill your entire hotbar with food if you wanted to be able to heal yourself quickly. Yeah, I'm not gonna be nostalgic about this one. Food is much better than it used to be. Did you know you can get Minecraft for free? Don't worry, I swear this is legal. If you just go to classicminecraft.net, you're able to play the original web demo of Minecraft. Back when there were no mobs, there wasn't any health, and the world wasn't infinite. All you could do was walk around and place and break blocks. It was a much simpler time. And although it practically has no features, there's a certain peace that comes from playing this version of the game. I know it's been talked about a lot, but I still can't get over the fact that you used to be able to milk squids in Minecraft. It was just so weird! Like, I thought squids were supposed to shoot ink. Why are they making milk? I don't know, honestly, just talking about it makes me feel gross. Moving on! Although these are technically called advancements in-game, pretty much everyone just calls them achievements, since that's what they were originally called, and that's the word most games use. For some reason, when they overhauled the achievement system, they also decided to rename them to advancements instead. You could argue that the rename makes more sense, since most of the advancements in Minecraft are things you do to advance in the game, but I think I'll stick with calling them what they actually are. A pivotal Minecraft mechanic from before the 1.9 combat update is sword blocking. Yeah, we used to be able to guard ourselves with our swords in order to take less damage. Nowadays, we can only block ourselves from damage with an entirely separate item that has to take up an extra inventory slot. The feature is so good that people still prefer to do PvP in these older versions just to have sword blocking back. I doubt we'll ever see sword blocking return, but it's nice to know that there are some people out there still using it. When peaceful mode was first added, it wasn't exactly all that peaceful. Although hostile mobs weren't able to spawn in peaceful mode, it was still possible for neutral mobs like wolves to spawn, and when angered, these neutral mobs would still attack and kill the player. This was a pretty fun oversight for the game mode that's supposed to make Minecraft a less violent game, since there are a few things quite as dangerous as being eaten alive by an entire pack of wolves. Of course, this was eventually changed, and all neutral mobs had their hostile behavior completely removed when the game was in peaceful. Remember Minecraft's old super glowy lava texture? It felt a lot more hot and goopy, like a lava lamp, as compared to the current lava texture, which just looks like a lake filled with melted cheese or baked beans or something. The old lava had such a vibe. I want to touch it or drink it or something. Nowadays, people build all sorts of bases using the countless number of blocks Minecraft has added over the years. But back in the early days, you were pretty much limited to cobblestone and oak wood, so it was hard to build a home that felt very unique. Because of this, lots of players ended up building houses into the size of mountains, or transforming a cave into a stylish cave base. Not only is this the easiest way to quickly build yourself a home in the early game, but it also means you don't have to worry too much about making a nice looking exterior, and you can just focus on designing a nice interior. As for me, I was and still am just a dirt house guy. I like to keep it classy. Structures that have good loot are something modern Minecrafters might take for granted, as in earlier versions of the game, there was only one structure that ever gave you anything good, and that was the village of Blacksmith. This building always had a chest with iron armor, tools, diamonds, diamonds, obsidian, or food, giving players who found it a big head start in their survival world. It's still an exciting structure to find for sure, but with so many other places where good loot chests spawn, finding a blacksmith really just doesn't hit the same as it used to. Minecraft's original death screen was pretty similar to how it looks today, but there was one very significant difference. Instead of the screen reading "you died," it just said "game over." This was maybe a bit misleading because the phrase "game over" might make the player think they've lost all their progress and have to start over, which obviously isn't true unless you're playing in hardcore mode. For that reason, I think "you died" fits a lot better for a survival game like Minecraft, where you effectively have infinite lives. The chest feels like it's been around since the beginning of Minecraft, having undergone very few changes. But did you know that originally, instead of having its slightly slimmer block model with an opening animation, it was literally just a solid block? It didn't animate. The double chest variant looked really weird, and it wasn't even rotatable. The latch just always faced west. I'm very glad we now have the new model and animation because the old chest just didn't feel right. Do you remember the pain of enchanting in older versions of Minecraft where all of your levels would be taken from you when you enchant one item? Currently, only a few levels are taken, along with your lapis, but originally, if you did a level 30 enchantment, all 30 of your levels were just gone! Not to mention, the original enchantment limit wasn't 30, it was actually 50! So, trying to upgrade all of your gear to the maximum level was an insane grind, and repairing your items was a pain, especially considering mending didn't exist yet. So, all of your tools would eventually break anyway. Honestly, maybe the game was better off like that. Zombies are one of Minecraft's first mobs, and as such, the item they originally dropped was literally just a placeholder: feathers. Why exactly would a zombie have feathers in it? I don't know. Maybe it's stuffed like a pillow. Maybe it ate a chicken feathers and all. Could be anything. The better question is this: why do zombies burn in the sun? What, are they like vampires? When you cast out your fishing rod in Minecraft versions before beta 1.6, instead of using the current cast fishing rod texture, it would just use the stick texture. This made it look like the fishing rod's reel just disappeared while you were using the fishing rod, and reappeared when you pulled the hook back in, which really didn't make any sense at all. I mean, seriously, this is just a stick! Do you remember when you could save on materials by cutting your ladders in half? Seriously, just by placing one block gaps all the way up to the top of your ladder, you can create a ladder that functions completely normally for half the resources. Unfortunately, this trick no longer works, but hey, maybe it's for the best. A ladder with a bunch of gaps in it does look pretty darn ugly. Pigs seem pretty useless nowadays since they only drop pork chops, which aren't even the best food in the game. But originally, pigs were super useful because pork chops were the only food in the game. Not every mob dropped meat in the beginning. Cows just gave you leather, chickens gave you feathers, and sheep gave you wool. This made pigs super useful, but that glory didn't last long, as pretty quickly Mojang decided that other mobs should give the player food too, and now pigs are pretty much only good for riding, and they're not even the best at that either. Useless pig! Minecraft sunsets are sort of peaceful, but they didn't used to be. In older versions of the game, the sun set like this, with the whole world getting suddenly darker one level at a time, as opposed to the gradual fade we're familiar with today. It almost felt like someone was slowly turning off the lights in a room one at a time, and although that's pretty unrealistic for light coming from the sky, it was pretty terrifying. Nowadays, the Nether has lots of things to do. There are 5 unique biomes, 11 mobs, and 2 dungeons for players to explore. But back when the Nether was first added, it looked something like this. Pretty similar to the current Nether, right? Well, this is literally all there was. One endless biome filled with lava and netherrack, a few ghasts and zombie pigmen, and that was it. There wasn't any structures, no rare biomes, and no interesting mobs to hunt. And even the mobs you could kill didn't drop anything of use. The ghast didn't drop any ghast tears for brewing regeneration potions, because this was before the game even had potion brewing. And zombie pigmen did drop cooked pork chops back then. But since fighting them is so dangerous, it's a much better idea to just farm pigs back in the overworld. Ultimately, the only useful things you could find in the Nether were infinite lava and glowstone blocks, just barely saving this entire dimension from being completely useless. Veteran players likely remember that it used to be impossible to place 2 chests next to each other. If you tried to place a chest next to another chest, it would combine into a large chest, and then if you tried to place a third next to that, the game just wouldn't let you. This meant that your chest rooms would always have these awkward gaps between the chests, which was really ugly and a huge huge waste of space. Eventually, we got the trapped chest, which can be placed next to regular chests. But every trapped chest you make costs one tripwire hook, which can get pretty expensive pretty quickly, so you'd have to be really rich if you wanted to place your chests next to each other. It was only in 2018, during the 1.13 update, that Mojang finally decided to let us place chests down side by side, 8 years after the block was first added to the game. I wonder what took them so long. Do you remember when the creative inventory looked like this? Instead of being organized into tabs, it was just one super long list of every item in the game, and the item versions of blocks had this weird lack of shading that made them way brighter than they actually look in the world. It may be a small thing, but I much prefer the way blocks look in the inventory nowadays. It's a lot more accurate and doesn't burn my eyeballs. Minecraft has so many flowers, with new ones still being added in recent updates. But for the longest time, the only flowers in the game were just these two, the dandelion and the rose. For over 4 years, if you wanted to bring life and color to your builds, these were your only options, making any flower fields just look like they were covered in splatters of ketchup and mustard. Thank goodness they eventually added flowers like tulips, lilacs, and eye blossoms, because the game desperately needed them. Building a house out of random ore blocks like diamond and gold is a core experience for every Minecraft player, and these structures are a big part of early Minecraft's identity. Something about building a big, ugly, gratuitous cyan house still just makes me feel good inside. I feel powerful. Do you remember how terrible boats used to be? Not only were they painfully slow to the point of being nearly useless, but they were also so unbelievably fragile, and lightly bumping into any block would cause your boat to shatter into sticks, wasting all of the wood it took to craft it. Maybe the reason these boats were so slow was just because they didn't have paddles. I mean, what was Steve doing before? Paddling the boat with his hands? Sounds like this is your own fault, buddy.